Welcome to The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky, a weekly podcast that breaks down politics, policy, and current affairs. I'm Becky Scherr.
And I'm Michael Brodkorb.
Today we are joined by former Representative Ryan Winkler. Ryan served 2 stints in the Minnesota House of Representatives, first from 2007 to 2015, and the latter from 2019 to 2023. In October 2021, Winkler announced he would run for Hennepin County Attorney after Mike Freeman announced he would not seek re-election. Winkler sought but did not receive the DFL endorsement for Hennepin County Attorney, which Mary Moriarity won. He ran in the multi-candidate primary election but did not advance to the general. In the general election, Moriarty defeated Martha Holton Dimmick. Last week, Ryan went on social media to criticize Mary Moriarty for intervening to quote, save a child molester from prison over the objection of her own professional prosecutor. This Hennepin County attorney is making all of our children less safe. She shouldn't even serve a full term. We invited Ryan to be a guest on the podcast to talk about why he spoke up and to discuss the relationship between Mary Moriarty and the residents of Hennepin County when it comes to public safety. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the show.
We're happy to be joined today by former State Representative Ryan Winkler. Ryan Winkler made some comments on social media last week about the Mary Moriarty and the prosecution of some cases in Hennepin County. We thought former Representative Winkler would be a great guest to come on and talk about public safety and crime that's going on in Hennepin County. Ryan, thank you for joining us this week.
Yeah, happy to join you.
Give us your take on why you decided to speak out last week.
Well, I guess first of all, I'd have to say that I'm not the ideal person to be making criticisms of County Attorney Mary Moriarty because I lost a campaign to her, and I think people could easily see my commentary as, sort of the bitter ramblings of a defeated candidate. Both parties have those. And, I'm not the perfect person to be speaking out, but I think we've seen from her very first press conference as county attorney an approach to the office of prosecutor that I don't think is about justice or about the welfare or the safety of Hennepin County residents. It feels more like a person who has almost a vendetta against the criminal justice system. Rather than trying to seek justice in a particular case, the county attorney seems more focused on changing the criminal justice system, regardless of the injustice that individuals may experience when they come to the county seeking a prosecution, or when their family members have been harmed, or when they've been harmed. So I just think there needs to be a correction in that office. And if there isn't a correction, there needs to be a new county attorney.
Let me address what you said in response to everybody. Representative, you have always been someone, Becky and I have known you over the years and observed you. I think this is Becky's first interaction with you. I've been on the receiving end of some of your sparring. You are an A-plus combatant. And part of the reason we wanted to reach out to you is understand very full well the dynamic between you and County Attorney Moriarty, but you are well-researched. You have principled positions, and you're the exact type of person that we would want to have come on, and appreciate you disclosing the history between you and Moriarty. But independent of that's why we wanted you to come on. It's just to talk about it, because this is an issue. Whether you win or lose an election, people still have a voice. And so we appreciate you coming on. But I'm glad you disclosed that. But I want you to know from our perspective, your experience in the race, plus your background in the legislature, your work as a lawyer, and your understanding of these issues makes you a subject matter expert, whether you win or lost the race. And so putting that aside, we again just appreciate you coming back on.
A lot of how County Attorney Moriarty has conducted herself follows along the lines of what she campaigned on, how she was going to conduct herself. Do you think that still warrants valid criticism? I believe personally, yes. I think anybody, regardless of whether you're following through on campaign promises or not. But what is your take on that? Of we kind of what we're getting is kind of what we saw on the campaign trail.
I think people who had followed her career and her record closely would see that this would be the expectation the County Attorney Moriarty would bring, that this is the kind of county attorney she would be. There's no question that she not only you would expect a combative, principled public defender would ruffle feathers on the prosecution side, might ruffle feathers in the judiciary, might take unpopular stands on behalf of uh, defendants because they have a right to have a zealous advocate on their side and get a fair shake in a system that is all too often unjust and all too often does punish people who are in the wrong place at the wrong time or come from the wrong background or look like the wrong person. So there is a lot of injustice. There's a reason why a public defender would have a reputation for, as you said, Michael, being an A-plus combatant. But the reality is that uh, this individual was not good at working with public defenders. When I was campaigning, I had people coming to me saying that they were career public defenders who'd given their whole careers to this work and were pushed aside, were terminated, were bullied by Mary Moriarty when she was the chief public defender, and that's why she lost, or that's why she was discharged from that position. So it's not just combatants that feel the attack from Mary Moriarty. It's also people who should be allies. I think we're seeing that right now with this SRO issue, which, if you're following it closely, the county attorney went out of her way to issue a legal opinion different from Attorney General Ellison's opinion on the issue and made clear that the Attorney General's opinion was not binding if she chose to prosecute a police officer for violating the state statute. So effectively undermining the the Attorney General's interpretation of state law for no particular reason that's obvious to anyone except perhaps a bit of payback uh, from the McKeever case, which she very publicly denounced the Attorney General for taking on. So it's a lot of in the weeds, but to your point, yes, there is a need for correction in the judicial system, the judiciary, the criminal justice system needs a correction. A person who believes in individual rights and protecting the vulnerable or addressing the racial bias in the system, there's a reason and a purpose behind all of that. I think that is what people were voting for. But there's a whole other side that I think people who have known Mary Moriarty for a long time were more concerned about.
While you were campaigning last year on this, in this race, is this something you or other opponents of Mary Moriarty brought up of some of the potential issues with her statements and actions that we would see should she be elected and win this office?
I think some of those concerns were raised. I think the big challenge in a race like Hennepin County Attorney is, it's a quarter of the state's population in one county. It's the most expensive media market. There was a very uh, busy, loud national election going on at the same time, and I think it was just, raising public awareness of the race and the candidates was extremely difficult. I raised more money and spent more money through a primary campaign than any candidate ever had in state history. And it was a drop in the ocean compared to the size of the electorate. So, yes, these issues were raised. I think the resources, the money it would take to really bring home these criticisms simply weren't there in a busy election year.
You touched on this subject, and I want to circle back with it. Attorney General Ellison took over a case from Moriarty earlier this year. Should he be doing more of that in relation to the dynamic between her and taking over more of those cases?
I'm not sure that it's a good precedent or a good practice. The county attorney for each county is elected by that county. The attorney general is not the state's prosecutor. They're not set up to prosecute all cases or to second guess every election or elected official's prosecution. The McKeever case, I think, was really an outlier. I think you could make a very strong case that other plea deals that Moriarty has insisted on rise to the same level as the McKeever case, particularly what the Markey family is experiencing right now. But I am understanding of why the attorney general and the governor don't want to become the prosecutor for Hennepin County as on a daily basis. That just doesn't what they're set up to do, and it doesn't work long term. And it's a tough situation, frankly. These are cases, in my opinion, where there is not justice for the victims, justice for the families, where the sentences are not proportionate to the crime, and the system uh, is not working any better when people who do horrific things receive very light punishments than it is if people who do bad things get very bad punishments or disproportionate punishments. The goal and purpose and legitimacy of the justice system is to have the punishment and the crime be proportionate to each other. So I guess my point is, I don't think that we want to create a state in which the attorney general is the prosecutor for every county. And at some point, you have to say, no, I'm not going to take these cases.
The specific case that you spoke up against was once again a situation where there is Mary Moriarty, in her role in Hennepin County Attorney, has chosen to intervene, chose to get involved, chose to take a different perspective and a different tactic than her predecessor, Mike Freeman, did. In many of these instances, line prosecutors, people that were on the line working in these offices, had made assurances to victims' families as to how these cases would come into a courtroom. What would be the position of the prosecutor coming into these cases? And then those deals are unraveling and there's a miscommunication, lack of communication, and you're seeing situations where victims' families or victims themselves are finding out in not an appropriate timeline as to how these cases and the trajectory of these cases are going. Can you describe why that's so traumatic and problematic for victims' families in the criminal justice system?
I hope any of us could understand how, I mean, no, we don't know what it feels to have a brother or a son murdered. We don't hopefully know what it feels like to have a 9-year-old child sexually assaulted. But if you put yourself in the position of that family, if you have any empathy whatsoever, you understand why justice is so important, because you cannot undo the harm. You cannot make your family member live again. You can't make your child well again immediately. And these traumatic crimes affect not just the victim and the family, but they can affect whole communities for years to come. And that's why the justice system is based on some concept of proportionality. But if you're in that situation, you're already traumatized. Most of us already feel a bit powerless in the justice system. It's a big, powerful system, and an individual doesn't have a lot. And so you look for people, victims' rights advocates or prosecutors who are going to take your pain seriously and your trauma seriously and make your family member or yourself feel like you matter in this. And to be, it's one thing not to get the outcome you want, right? I mean, probably nobody gets the outcome they want because you can't restore what was lost. But to feel that you're disrespected or that you're dismissed or that you're a pawn in a larger game, I think is what really makes people feel outraged and feel completely powerless. So I mean, the Markey family has requested the Attorney General take over the case in which uh, uh, their husband and I'm sorry, their son and brother was killed as part of a carjacking, and they described a meeting with the county attorney in which they were, in their minds and their experience, treated rudely, their concerns dismissed, and that just, we can disagree, right? We can say this is a hard case. I know you don't get what you want in this outcome, but I will do everything I can to help your family get through this. There's real sincerity in working with people who have been victims or who are getting a raw deal in some way, and then there's kind of the dismissive talking points at a press conference, which is more what we've been hearing lately. The comments like, "Oh, I feel so terribly for them, but I'm not going to do anything, or I'm going to create these bad experiences for these victims when they're having these meetings." So, I just think it's partly tone, it's partly the outcomes in the cases, and it's partly um, the attitude that she's the only person who's right.
87 counties in the state. How many other county attorneys, without naming, but I want to put in context, how much of an island is Hennepin County right now in their approach to criminal justice?
I don't think it would be fair to say that. First of all, there are hundreds of dedicated prosecutors, professionals in that office who are going to work every day and seeking justice, representing the state against defendants who have committed crimes, and those professional prosecutors are doing their work. Um, and while we can talk about a number of cases that have made the news, we don't talk a lot about all the day-to-day examples of prosecutors working well with local police departments to make sure that justice is done in particular cases or perpetrators are caught. And it's also true that there is no evidence that harsh sentences deter crime. There is some evidence that uh, the certainty of punishment, that there will be a consequence for crime helps to deter it. But there isn't really evidence that harsher sentences will deter crime. So I think it's possible. I think that Mary Moriarty as county attorney is a bit of an outlier from other county attorneys, but I think county attorney's office in Hennepin County does a great I mean, their prosecutors do great work. They work hard every day, and they are doing their best to do justice every day. And I've heard from many of them in the last 9 months about the difficulty they're having right now, but their determination to keep doing the work.
There is a common thread that I've noticed in a lot of the issues that Mary Moriarty's been tripped up on, and it's about this kind of I'm always right, and it's about the level of communication. It does seem to me that a lot of these issues right now focus on how she is performing in her office and how she's communicating these decisions. And there just seems to be a lack of awareness of the victims' families in these circumstances. And it comes down to really centered on her role as county attorney. Do you agree with that?
Well, I mean, yes, and I think that's what grabs a lot of public attention. I think it's important to remember that the mission is justice for people in the county. It is public safety, and that there are all kinds of people doing good work, not just at the county attorney's office or police departments, but in communities, activists who are out there trying to save their neighborhoods from crime and keep it safe for their kids and so on. So I guess yeah, she has become sort of a public example of taking needed reforms and good ideas and taking it too far and not caring about justice in particular cases. Um, but we should not let that distract us from the good work that's happening and the progress being made on crime reduction and making sure that communities are safe. So yes, I think you're right, but we can go too far in focusing on one individual and uh, I guess um, just kind of creating a typical political atmosphere where the acts of one elected official come to be a stand-in for the whole system which isn't, and she's not really representative of that whole system.
Well, you teed me up perfectly for my next question. Is this a Democrat versus Republican issue, or does it span both parties?
Well, that's part of why I felt, I didn't endorse in the county attorney's race after I left. I didn't think my endorsement was going to make much difference to anybody. I thought both candidates, had their strengths and weaknesses. I didn't say anything publicly really for the first 9 months. And I've seen Democrats be quiet and kind of talk behind closed doors or quietly about some of the things that Moriarty has been doing. And I've seen Republicans be very loud. And it just isn't right, I don't think, for these victims and families to feel like this is a partisan issue. I think it's important for them to know that there are people who agree with them, who see their pain and loss, who are Democrats, and many, many Democrats do, right? But for it to be a Republican only criticism, I think would be a disservice to those individuals, which is part of the reason I felt like I'm going to finally say something publicly about this.
Along those lines, in this recent Star Tribune article that you linked to in your tweet, Moriarty had said accountability and public safety don't always translate to prison. Can you speak a little bit to, because while we don't want to make it political, obviously there is some inherent politicalness surrounding the public safety and criminal justice system and the path forward there. Can you speak a little bit to maybe her comment there? And as you said, prison doesn't always translate into deterrence. A little bit maybe of the Democrat Party view, or maybe messaging that needs to be happen surrounding that, and how we can still hold people accountable, especially for some of these horrific crimes, the murder, rape, sexual assault, whatever it might be, and make sure we are trying to deter that future crime.
Well, look, that's what I tried to do in a campaign, and it didn't work out very well. I didn't think we were very well served in public safety to have one group of people saying, crime is rampant, everything is horrible, and the only thing we can do is, arrest people and throw them in jail, versus another group of people saying nobody should be arrested, everybody's a victim, and everybody should be released. And if we love everyone well enough, or if we love everyone enough, then good things will happen, right? Like two extremes saying, in my opinion, ridiculous things. Uh, Yet our political system is really geared more towards two extremes saying ridiculous things, and whoever is the loudest wins is kind of where we are right now. And so I think it's kind of a no man's land in between, right? You're going to be fired at from both sides if you try to take a middle ground or a middle path. And it doesn't really, it looks like, people said, oh, I wish you'd had this backbone when you were running. Well, I didn't think getting into a pissing match was really going to serve public safety when I was running. It probably would have helped me win a race, but I didn't think is what we needed in public safety. So I think most people, I don't know, this is a political question. You guys help me answer it. The vast majority of people are center left or center right. They do not like the far left, and they are scared of the far right. So what kind of system do we have where those are the voices that dominate the public discussion and seem to dominate the nomination process for the parties overall? So, for a Democrat to say we need to, it shouldn't be controversial or like noteworthy for a Democrat to say that a person who rapes a 9-year-old child deserves more than 6 months in prison. Like, that should not be a noteworthy statement at all. That should be the most uncontroversial thing I could have said, and yet it generated a lot of attention.
How did we get there? How did a statement that shouldn't be so controversial become so controversial?
I don't really, are you asking big picture, or just it's particularly in the kind of criminal justice system?
Big picture, or whatever way you want to help answer it for us.
Well, I mean, I think big picture, the whole political system right now, the incentives are to be extreme and loud. That's how you get attention. We don't have, three TV news stations moderating everybody, the political discussion. We don't have the newspapers moderating the political discussion. We have a fragmented kind of food fight kind of political system. And if you can get 20% behind you, that's a pretty powerful base right now. And that means getting 20% of people who tend to be very like extreme doctrinaire or extreme on a position, get them fired up and show that you're really one of them, you're their person. And suddenly you're getting more attention than the person who is speaking on behalf of the vast majority. I think that's true in criminal justice right now. I think the whole public safety debate has boiled down to that. It is, ridiculous to have the Democratic position on public safety to be defined in any way by defund the police. Literally, I think the only people who ever said that were a few Minneapolis City Council members right after an extremely traumatic series of events. And yet the incentive for Republicans is to blast and to paint all Democrats as being people who believe in defunding the police. So then, if it's like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if Democrats are going to be attacked for being far left on criminal justice issues, we might as well be far left on criminal justice issues, because we're going to be painted that way anyway. There's no incentive really to try to moderate a position. And I'm sure that you can name issues on the Republican side where it feels the same way, where you're being kind of your positions are uh, you know, being a link to the most extreme people, not to what a moderate, more moderate candidate actually believes. Now, I tend to think you have more extremists in higher ranks on the Republican side than we have Democrats who are extremists on in the upper ranks on the Democratic side, but the dynamic is similar.
I would say to you that part of the reason we wanted to have you on was because not to turn this into a Democrat on Republican issue, but to talk about it from the standpoint of that your statement that you made on social media, that's a 95-5 issue. 95% of Minnesotans would agree with you. And there was a very vocal minority that chimed in. And I just thought it was appalling what the reaction was to your tweet on social media. And my objective wasn't to highlight the 5%, was to bring you on to talk about what I think is a very important issue for Minnesotans, which is they want balance in the criminal justice system right now. And I thought that your perspective was incredibly reasonable. And
There's no
one of
place. There's no place in American politics for a reasonable position.
well, that is true. I've said it, as Ken Brockman said, I'll say it before and I'll say it again, democracy simply doesn't work. And sometimes it just doesn't. And it's unfortunate though. And I will say, as Becky and I did an episode this morning, a bonus episode that we're going to release with someone from the Department of Public Safety. And as I noted on that episode, I pled guilty to a DWI in 2013. I've spent the last 10 years volunteering, talking with victims' families. I've spoken with family members who have lost members of their family to drinking and driving related incidents, people that have been hit by cars, people that have been incarcerated. And one of the biggest components of the judicial system that I think sometimes gets overlooked because of other incidents in the news is being advocates for victims' families. And they are such a critical part of the process. And so your comments about it really resonated with me because I do think it's a component that gets overlooked. I do think when you're going into the criminal justice system, particularly if you're a victim's family who has lost a member of their family and they're not around, it's very difficult to fill that void, to fill that aspect of their life again. And so the only place where there can be that reform is on the perpetrator. And in that instance, I think sometimes victims' families get lost. And so your advocacy, you taking that stand, and again, the position that you did, if you were to run statewide and poll that, I think it would be a 95-5 issue. And it's remarkable the frustration that you took on social media. And I think we could all say that social media brings out the worst in people and it elevates the most passionate voices sometimes. And those passionate voices aren't right. But I was really surprised and taken aback by what you received after coming out with that statement.
Well, it wasn't really very many people who who were criticizing me for what I was saying. It was a few. It wasn't a lot. I think you see this in both political parties. Most elected officials, if given a choice, would rather not criticize a member of their own party, right? They would rather
Correct.
not be the person to do that. They would rather let someone else help correct the person who needs to be corrected, right? And so, since I am neither a candidate nor an elected official at the present time, maybe I have a bit more freedom to speak up compared to others because it is, as you know, it's not that easy to keep a political coalition together. And if you go around criticizing your team all the time, it's hard to, keep that team together. So so what's noteworthy to me is not the few people who were critical of what I had to say. It it's noteworthy to me that how silent most elected officials are on the subject.
If you're a resident of Hennepin County right now, where do family go? Where do families go if they're a victim of, they find themselves or a member of their family as a victim of crime in Hennepin County? Do they rely on the Hennepin County Attorney's Office? One of the reasons I bring that up and tee this up a bit is I was speaking to someone who had been a city prosecutor in a city in Hennepin County in previous years, and he thought one of the roles was that some of these city attorneys might need to step up, maybe take some of these cases as misdemeanor cases, gross misdemeanor cases, if the county attorney isn't going to take them on as and prosecute them as fully as they can. Where do people go in Hennepin County right now?
Well, first of all, as I said at the beginning, there are hundreds of very dedicated professionals in the county attorney's office who are there to prosecute crime to be victims advocates and to try to help families get through extremely difficult circumstances. So they should still go to the county attorney's office. I think the Markey family right now, for example, they don't have there's no city attorney for them to go to. They're asking the state to step in a particular case, and they're trying to be as public as they can to raise concerns about the plea deal in the murder of Steve Markey. So, what do they? I mean, most of the time, in most cases, people should go to the county attorney's office and rely on the professionals there. And when the county attorney steps in to move a case in a position away from justice, I think public outcry and maybe appealing to the state officials is the best recourse. I don't think finding a misdemeanor case against Braveheart is really going to satisfy the Markey family, and it shouldn't.
Fair point.
We, in some of these other states with more progressive prosecutors, we have seen different attempts to recall or impeach. Is there seems to be an organized effort to recall Moriarty. What's your take on that?
I think it's an extremely high bar to clear. It's not just signatures; you have to show wrongdoing, and I think that's just a very difficult thing to do. And San Francisco is the kind of the most recent big case I can think of where it was successful. We have different laws, and there are different dynamics in place. And frankly, in that recall, millions of dollars were raised and spent in order to, effectively carry out that recall. And that's just a dynamic I don't see us having here right now. So, to me, the only the likely outcome is just public outcry, and there's another campaign in 4 years, and presumably somebody will challenge the incumbent county attorney at that point in time.
Once again, you teed me up perfectly for my next question. You mentioned in your tweet that you don't believe that Moriarty should fulfill her full term. Are you whether it's completing her term or running next time around, or are you throwing your hat back in the ring?
No, I'm not. Um, you know, First of all, it's a long time from now, and I don't know that I'll be, it's something I'll want to do. Um, I can see being involved in a campaign to help the right candidate, challenge the current county attorney and try to get a better person in that office. Or, even better would be if Mary Moriarty were to listen to the criticism and change course and recognize that, the first 9 months on the job maybe are, kind of lingering effects from being a fierce public defender, and that the job is a bit different. So I would, there's always the chance that she will change what she's doing, but continuing on the same path is not acceptable. And so I'm not saying no, never, no way would I run again, but it's not on my radar at all right now.
Former Representative Winkler, it was really good to be on here today. We appreciate you speaking up, and we hope you continue to do so. Even if we disagree on issues, please continue to be the A+ combatant that you've always been, and continue to swing some elbows. Where can people follow you for more information on you? Social
Well,
media.
social media, at underline or underscore Ryan Winkler is Twitter. I don't remember all my handles. I'm not out there trying to promote myself right now. I will say this. I noticed that Republicans really like it when Democrats criticize other Democrats, and I noticed that Democrats really love it when Republicans criticize other Republicans. So, I'm not surprised that it's popular right now on the right to have me make these comments, and don't get used to it.
No, I appreciate that. And it's well taken. Becky and I have tried to always take a thoughtful approach with our guests. And we've had some people that we work with have been impacted by crime, people that have been victims of carjacking. And this has always been an issue, particularly from the victims advocates perspective. It's always been near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of years volunteering on it. And so your statements, aside from the partisanship, um, rang true, and we wanted to certainly give you a voice and validate that. Wanted to just give some airtime to you and give you some props for speaking up and speaking up when we know it's uncomfortable to speak up.
And just to echo, I certainly it is, as Republicans, we love Democrat on Democrat violence and vice versa. But I do want to commend you because I know it's not always easy. This is something we've tried with this podcast. We have been very critical of Republicans, just like we have of Democrats. But as you mentioned before, while the far right, far left are the ones that get the most attention, there are the bigger chunk of voters and Minnesotans that sit in that middle, and that's what Michael and I kind of tend to put ourselves in that bucket of the middle right. And so I think that there is always a need to have, when somebody deserves to be criticized, whether that's from your own party or not. And so I know it's not easy. I'm sure you got calls, text, emails, and of course tweet responses from folks within your own party expressing their frustration. So I do appreciate your doing that. And while you say not that you're not going to make it a habit, we highly encourage, if you continue to see things on either side, to make that known, and we'd be happy to have you back to discuss those.
All right. Sounds like a deal.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We just spoke with former state representative Ryan Winkler. Your take.
Um, I want to start with, I like I said it right at the end. It is, I know how difficult it can be, and I'm sure you know even more than I do of when you sling some mud within your own party, the backlash that can come towards you. But I think it is an important thing to do, and I think that him being somebody who ran against her, had a vested interest in this seat and in this area of expertise. Who better to kind of have some of that? I think that obviously, I think that while we don't want to make every issue political, every issue is kind of inherently political. And a lot of this, from my perspective, largely stems from the Democrats' arrows at the public safety system, and are really trying to, as we discussed a little bit, just rehabilitate, which there is certainly a place for, but sometimes prison time is warranted. And in this situation that we're looking at here, the sexual assault and rape of a 9-year-old girl and probation, it's just absurd to me. And the re-victimization of that family, of that child, her parents, siblings, loved ones, is just abhorrent. And it really tears me up inside to see that you went through something so horrible, and the individual responsible, who is very clearly responsible for this, is not held accountable. It is just unacceptable.
The reason I wanted to have him on was because he took a lot of arrows, took a lot of swings, took a lot of punches for his statement on social media, and a statement that just isn't that controversial. 95, that his statement was, he was critical of Mary Moriarty for intervening to, quote, save a child molester from prison over the objection of her own professional prosecutor. This Hennepin County attorney is making all of our children less safe. She shouldn't serve a full term. Now, let's be clear. This is, as you unfortunately described accurately, this was about the rape of a 9-year-old girl. And there is something going on in Hennepin County when it comes to victims of crimes and how they feel about the job that the Hennepin County attorney is doing. And members of Mary Moriarty's own party have felt the need to intervene and stop some of her work in other cases. And the problem that Keith Ellison is in and the Attorney General is in is he did it once, and he's going to be asked to do it a lot more, because I don't think that Mary Moriarty is changing. She is pretty strong in her comments that this is what she campaigned on and this is what she wanted to do. And there is a part of this, and it was one of the questions that we asked, that I do think it's fair to say, should she be criticized for doing what she said she was going to do when she was running? That being said, there's a difference between her fulfilling her campaign promises and how some of these cases, the direction of them changing, the trajectory of them changing, are being communicated to victims and victims' families. And it seems to me, based on my reading of the stories, that there is a internal communication in Mary Moriarty's office between her leadership and some of the prosecutors on the line that are working directly with these cases, that the focus and what had been promised in the past is no longer going to be the case. And that's where I think she's running it into an issue, is that the bureaucracy that she's trying to shift has not caught up with, and that's still her responsibility, but has not caught up with how what she campaigned on has not gotten through to the people on the line yet. And what that creates is it creates situations where people feel that deals and information that's been shared with them about cases is changing as they're coming in a courtroom. Again, I'm not an attorney, not played one on TV, but over the last 10 years, I've spent a lot of time with families who have lost family members, who people themselves have been a part of the criminal justice system. And it's so critically important that communication between prosecutors and victims' families is precise and clear. And when things change, particularly for the worst, that's never a good situation. And it seems that Mary Moriarty has created a number of upset constituents in Hennepin County about her work.
Oh, I was just gonna say to that point, I mean, I think this is also I think that Representative Winkler had brought this up of some of that, just cold or the tone and demeanor in which the individuals from within the office are dealing with the victims' families. Not only the lack of information or explanation in this stuff, but just also their way of delivering it. And I think again, when you have something that is these people that are vulnerable and have gone through hell at whatever level, then you're sitting with somebody that's not only telling you that they're not going to do this, but they're saying it in a way that basically makes you feel even worse. It's just a lot needs to happen within that office, and it's really unfortunate. To I can not only I just can't even empathize or feel what these victims and their families are going through. But I do think it's largely a making of this larger picture of what's been going on within politics when it comes to public safety. And she just happens to be the lightning bearer for this at the time.
We've spent a lot of time talking about this from, I think, the appropriate perspective, which is victim side. But let's just take just a minute or two here and talk about it from the pure political side and break it down for a second. Mary Moriarty is making a number of people inside the DFL look reasonable on public safety.
Mhm.
And one person that she's making look very reasonable is Keith Ellison. Your take on that?
I mean, it's wild, right? I mean, when we're talking about it, as Winkler had said, and the folks that everybody Republicans tie to Democrats to, and Democrats tie Republicans to, from my experience working in the Republican Party and different campaigns, a lot of times we would tie reasonable Democrats to Keith Ellison as the extremist, as the one that if, hey, they had a picture with Keith Ellison, so they guilt by association. Now, as you said, he's the reasonable one here. We saw this with the SRO issue and Mary Moriarty's, statement, and I don't believe that this is going to be the last time we're seeing some of this, butting of heads, and it is just insane to me that this is the different. We have, reasonable Democrats, we have Keith Ellison, and then we have Mary Moriarty, and that spectrum of what that looks like is evolving and just pretty wild right now.
I always want to create opportunities for people to come on, and I appreciate and understand the intellectual consistency that Mary Moriarty is offering. And I agree with Ryan Winkler and a number of the victims' families that it's not balanced right now. And I hope we can talk about this conversation more. But it was interesting to speak with former state representative Winkler. And I would hope that he continues to speak up. It's probably not comfortable. It's probably not easy. But I do hope he continues to speak up. And that says we need more people, not from just a partisan perspective. This isn't just partisan bickering, but people who are interested in making the criminal justice system more balanced, particularly for victims' families. And I think that's what's needed in the state, and I hope the conversation continues.
Very much agreed.
Let's get into one of my favorite subjects that we cover on this podcast, in this new iteration of our podcast, fantasy football. In every aspect of this conversation, in every aspect of fantasy football, I am dominating. I'm crushing it. Let's begin the conversation. How are you feeling this week?
I'm feeling quite great. Thanks for asking. I would like to start out the episode by saying that I am currently the week leader in my picks this
Well,
week.
we should just clear up for our listeners. Did you make your picks this week?
I made them all 16. I am leading with 9 correct out of 7 of those 16. You have 7.
But just want to
Less
be
than half.
clear. Just don't want to be clear. I'm still leading you. What's
Well,
let's talk about slow and steady for a second.
sometimes we gotta zoom in and then zoom out. So
Slow
we're
and
zooming
steady,
in
slow
here.
and steady. My position has been from the beginning of the season. I don't care who wins as long as it's not you and I defeat you. And I am still have a very, very comfortable lead. One of the questions we had for the person who prepared our script is, should Becky give up? And I thought our offline producer who posed that question,
You.
should Becky give up? So just to follow the script, Becky, should you give up?
Absolutely not. As you can see, I have gained 2 points so far to this week, which means I am only down by 6. I have moved into 3rd place, which is moving on up. I would also like to just point out that of the 5 weeks, I am the leader 2 of those 5 weeks. You are a leader 1 of those 5 weeks. So, I mean, I'm coming.
This is just amazing. This again, it's analysis, stats that are meaningless. I'm ahead of you. I'm comfortably in 2nd place. Spencer Creer's in 1st. You have moved from 3rd to 4th, from 3rd to 4th, from 3rd to 4th. You've been back and forth depending on when you make your picks. And I've just been slow and steady. I feel very comfortable where I am. I want to take a moment and break down my approach to fantasy football, particularly in a league that I'm the reigning champion of and that's my family's fantasy football league that I play with my wife, my sisters, and a number of my relatives. I am currently once again just dominating that league. And as the reigning champion, one of the strategies I like to use is I like to keep the league play fun. And what I've realized since I'm the reigning champion and have won consistently over the years is that when I win every week, it can really hurt the morale of the rest of the league. And so what I like to do during the season is I want to keep games close. I might lose one occasionally. That's all a part of the master strategy I have because winning every week and being so dominant just hurts the morale of everyone else in the league. I want everyone to feel comfortable and fun participating, that they have a sporting chance, even though they don't. And so what I would like to do is what I've done over the last couple of weeks is occasionally lose a few games. That's all part of the master plan that I have. It's all a part of a grand strategy just to make the league more engaging for my wife, my kids, and my sisters and other members of my family that participate.
Well, we'll find out if it's worth it. I gotta say real quick, I do appreciate your dedication. You once again backed the Vikings, and I did not. I tapped out.
Well, I wanted to point out, and you took the words right out of my mouth, and I wanted to disclose that I am the only one, and this is what I find so amazing, or if I think is worth noting, and we can end the subject on this. I will always pick the Vikings. I was the only one in the league that picked the Vikings this week. Every other person in the league picked the Kansas City Chief. Not to name names, but everyone else did. And I'm going to go down. I'm a loyal Viking fan. I don't feel I have an option on game day, even though there's a competition. If you want to win, Becky, by rooting against the Minnesota Vikings, you go right ahead. If that's
I,
you feel comfortable. Now, let's just be clear. If you feel comfortable, if you're going to be influenced by members of your family who support rival organizations in the league, speaking of your husband and his support of the Green Bay Packers, if you want to be influenced by it, that's fine. I'm going to stay true to the Minnesota Vikings, and I'm going to pick them every week.
I just must clear things up that I'm not rooting for the Chiefs. I'm just a realist. And come on.
Okay. Were you hoping Taylor Swift was there?
Sure. But come on. She went and saw her boyfriend, like I said before. She saw her boyfriend the last 2 weeks. She's got to play a little hard to get. Can't
That's
make it to
right.
every game.
I was hoping she was going to be there. I'm on a neighborhood group chat, and one of my neighbors and I are very much focused on this Taylor Swift drama, and I'm just really eating it up right now. It's fun to follow. It's great for the NFL, but it was tough. I think there were a lot of Vikings fans in the stadium that were hoping to see her yesterday, but she did not show up. But the Chiefs were victorious, and so as you pointed out eloquently, she has to play, as you said, someone hard to get. She
Yep.
can't. All right, good. Well, Becky, thank you again. And I hope your performance improves, but not too much.
Watch out next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
We want to thank you for listening to this episode of The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or on the platform where you listen. You can also leave a review on our website at @BBBreakPod. The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky is on all social media platforms, and we encourage you to follow us for content and new information about episodes. The Breakdown with Brodkorb and Becky will return next week with a new episode. Thank you so much.